Okay, how you doing, everybody? My name is Dean Olson. I am a songwriter, radio host, and producer from Orange County, California, and I'm really just an average guy who loves to make music. However, when I get behind a microphone, I become the StrongWriter on the radio, helping songwriters and artists keep musically fit. And the way I love to do that is through faith and hope and encouragement, by taking in the stories and experiences told to me by my wonderful guests, and by learning from the best in the business and passing it along to you. All right, let's get moving here. I want to welcome you to another beautiful day for a fantastic show. Thank you for tuning in to iHeart Radio. Power Me Up, Talk 24/7, the station with heart on iHeart. And I've been looking forward to meeting my very special guest after hearing her incredible instrumental tracks online and an album that I've been listening to. Her musicianship is impeccable. It's stunning to the ear. And the young woman that you're seeing on the screen is my special guest. She is CONNIE Hahn. She is a jazz piano artist with 2 spectacular albums to her credit and a third one coming out this September 2022 on the 23rd. The title is Secrets of Inanna. I've heard it, and so will you today. I love it, and it is my pleasure to welcome to the program the one, the only, CONNIE Hahn.
Thank you.
How's that? Did I do that intro okay?
Oh, that was great. The fanfare, I heard it. It was amazing. I appreciate the warm welcome, and thank you for having me on the show, Dean.
You're very welcome. I am so excited when I get to talk to somebody who's in the jazz world. Do you consider yourself a jazz artist? I asked you this offline, but let's for the show. Tell me a little bit about why you chose jazz as your forte or your commitment.
Yeah, I definitely consider it my main craft, and it is the foundational language of everything that I do musically and express musically. It is a language, and there are many dialects in this language, and I've been heavily influenced by a few giants in the jazz piano idiom, including McCoy Tyner, Art Tatum, Hank Jones, Chick Corea. I like to make sure I cover a wide range within the history that has both hands in the tradition, including Harlem Stride, as well as modern, more angular, abstracted post-bop, as I said, Chick Corea and McCoy Tyner. So
you sound like you think things out a lot more than I do. All I know is that when and I love that you're going back to traditional giants of the 20th century, because I'll even throw Bill Evans in there. There's a little bit of that I hear in your because you're playing on a Steinway. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of the greats put Steinway on the top of their list as their instrument of choice. Art Tatum did that. I think you said you mentioned him. Yeah.
Yeah. Art Tatum is he's an immortal Steinway artist. He's in that there's a very elitist group within the Steinway artist roster that contains the greats that really made a huge footprint and impact on the art form, and Art Tatum is in there. I believe McCoy Tyner is in there. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, these guys, they definitely chose Steinway pianos because, I mean, I am a Steinway artist and I personally endorse their instruments as an artist because they have such depth and color in their instruments that you may arguably not get from other piano makers, which is interesting because my other favorite pianist is Chick Corea, who loves Yamahas, yes. Which makes sense because he's a very percussive and playful player, and that really lends itself to the Yamaha character. And I do get to play Yamahas a bit on the road, and some of them are really fun to play, especially with a drummer. So, yeah. But yeah, I played an amazing Steinway Model D 9-foot on the album. I recorded at the great studio Sear Sound, and that piano was monstrous. It was huge. The action was really heavy, and I kind of like that because it just makes it feel like a breathing, living thing. And yeah, I mean, it's I talk about pianos very nerdy, almost like how nerdy classical pianists get, even though I don't consider myself, I don't play like a classical pianist, even though I study it. Mm-hmm. It's a very different approach. It's more, I don't know, it's less pompous and graceful, you know. I mean,
Yeah. Well, in
so,
jazz, you have a little bit more room to express yourself. In classical, you can do that too, but you have to really be rigid and adhere to the source material. A lot of times, you're playing things that were written several hundred years before you were born, you know, and things like that. And with jazz, it's a little bit. You don't have to go as far back, and there's a lot to choose from. But everybody, that's the nice thing about jazz music over the years, that everybody sounds, they develop their own personality, and I think that's what you'll be doing. You probably already have that right now, but you put your own, you know, your own psyche and your own personality into what you play, I'm sure.
oh, I think it's unavoidable if
Yeah.
just as an artist you eventually get to that point. And I think even classical pianists get to that point because you still express your own interpretation of the piece, right?
Hmm.
And I like to say this funny thing about how jazz musicians can get away with making a bunch of mistakes because it's jazz,
Hmm.
but then in classical music the precision is utmost, like it's precious. And I think there's something that can be taken from that should be incorporated more into jazz music. Like, just because it's open and just because it's so creative doesn't mean that it's time to just do whatever. Like, I still think there needs to be I wouldn't say a plan, because you're supposed to be in the moment. It's very paradoxical.
Yes.
It's about creating like a cohesive story in the moment. And that, I think, is one of the most challenging parts of being a jazz musician. That is the one unique thing that classical musicians wouldn't have to deal with. But they both kind of they have the same common goal of creating really great music, right?
Yeah. Let me jump out of order here. I'm getting way ahead of myself, but you know, on your album, you're playing with some pretty legendary people already. You know, I read the names in there. There's quite a pedigree of quite a lineup that you have there, and probably because of your collaborator. How do you say this man's name? Bill Wasaki?
His name is Bill Wysaski.
Okay, I pronounced it improperly on purpose, so I get you to say the right.
Most
so
people
yeah.
ask about his name rather than mine before, so that's funny. Yeah, it's very common. No worries.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has been a long time collaborator of mine, and he was actually the brain trust behind the concept of the album, which is really great because he's a literature buff, and there's a very diverse amount of material there, and mythology was included in that material. So he brought the concept of Inanna to me, and when I read about her story, I was absolutely blown away by how much I related not only to her personally in terms of her personality, but also her arc, and how it deals with two mythological archetypes, the first being the hero's adventure, and the second being the death and resurrection archetype. And Bill definitely, I don't know how he came across Inanna, but he was like definitely the reason why like I even found out about this woman, because it's crazy how most people don't know who Inanna is, but they know who Aphrodite is, they know who Venus is, but as far as the Sumerian proto-goddess of love and war, she's kind of underground, I guess. But anyway, more about Bill. He produced and composed, arranged, played drums on the album, and he was actually the one who recommended Rich Perry and John Patitucci as well. So he played a large part, I would say 50%, in just creating the precious product at the end of this album, which I hope is communicating this cohesive, story musically as well as story-wise.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The name on the album is Connie Hans, so it's obviously your album. How much are you contributing besides just playing? Are you part of the composition, the collaboration of?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
On all the tracks, or just selected ones? Does Bill get to show off, like on that waltz that I heard on the? Yeah. That was a really great one on there. Right. I heard that. Yeah.
So he is a very gifted writer in terms of writing for the most beautiful music as far as aesthetic. And I approach the philosophy as there's beauty, and then there's meaning and sublime. And I think having meaningful art doesn't necessarily have to be beautiful. So I like to put a lot of grit and darkness and rough around the edges in my compositions, such as Gilgamesh and the Celestial Bull, the Gallo Pursuit, which is a very modern, edgy, almost like I wouldn't say it's a tribute, but it's definitely heavily inspired by like Chick Corea and his really buoyant, linear, modern approach on Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, from his 60s like debut album on, is it on Blue Note? I don't know if it's on Blue Note. But most of my compositions have that like common sort of like that edge. Like it's really, I would even say that it's youthful. It's very like flashy, right? And I'm like okay with that. You know, I'm 26. Come on.
Yeah. You're 26 now. That's something I wanted to bring up in the show too, because when you listen to this, you're going to be fooled by what you're hearing. Your sophistication transcends your age, shall I say. In other words, you sound older on your piano than you look, and you actually are. So I think that's a grand compliment. I think you've
thank you.
You've really accomplished something special.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
With that said, Bill contributes so much of the mature melodic writing on this album.
Yeah.
He is the one who came up with the concepts of having this ethereal, almost like chamber acoustic instrumentation with the piccolo and alto flute on the front and back tracks. And that creates this sort of like, well, the front and the end, kind of creating this cohesive, there's that word again, sort of order, I guess. And I think that's really cool. Prima Materia, Wind Rose Goddess, that waltz, he has all these chords, these major sharp 11 and minor 11, very beautiful ethereal chords that are heavily drawn from like classical impressionistic music. He doesn't think of it that way. I think of it that way because I'm into that stuff, but he gets it from like Stephen Sondheim, who is like a modern musical theater giant who has influenced our music quite a bit. But to answer your question, we split the tracks. Like 5 of the tracks I wrote, and 5 of the other tracks he wrote and arranged. I did no arranging on this. Everything that I did was original. He arranged Morning Star by Rogers Grant.
Right.
And arranged, wait, is that, oh no, he arranged Desert Air. Actually,
yeah, that was the Chick Corea one, right? Yeah. It did 2 that were composed,
right?
You know, by others.
Actually, no, he didn't arrange that. That was just, we just played the tune, so we just improvised like jazz. Sorry. But yeah, so we split 50-50. I wouldn't say that he's like that typical archetypal producer that you see in like pop music where it's like, okay, I'll write the artist all the songs. No, it's like equal collaboration, I would say. And he has a voice and I have a voice, and it ends up creating this, I think, I hope, this wide range of textures, emotions, dynamics, tempos on this record. So
great. Good explanation. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
And you did. Thank you for remembering the question, because you know I tend to. I just figured since we started talking about the album, let's just keep going there, because I think that this is important that we get the word out that you're having an album that you're promoting. And what I am curious about, when you all get into the studio, I assumed you did this all. You tracked it all together in the studio at the same time. You didn't like feed tracks in back and forth or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, in jazz, we are very prideful of doing everything. We'll do it live.
Yeah,
you know?
That's the best way, especially in your arena. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say though that for the more complex instrumentation tracks, including the front and back tracks that I mentioned that was orchestrated, Katis Buckingham did track from Los Angeles. But aside from that, all the trio and the quartet music was all done live.
Katis was doing the piccolo and the alto sax and all that stuff. Yeah, that we were talking about. Yeah,
alto flute. Yeah,
alto flute. Sorry about that. And incredible. The result is it's dynamite. Those are the tracks, especially there was one at the very end. I think it was called Enki's Gift, and you're kind of like trading off back and forth. It's gets a chance for Katis to show off that dynamic.
Yeah. And he's really genius at writing backgrounds, like horn backgrounds, flute backgrounds. It's not something that I'm a piano expert. Like, I am an expert at writing composition for piano and for jazz specific, but he like takes that from library music from the 70s. It's really out and cool and retro.
It really is.
Yeah.
The retro, you can definitely feel it. And in some ways, you know, it's very contemporary the way you're putting it out there, but it has such an homage to those, you know, late 50s, early 60s recordings on Blue Note and Verve and some of those others. You know, Miles Davis, Sonny Rollins, a lot of even Dave Brubeck. It's not the same feel as Dave Brubeck, but you know, there's just a vibe that sounds like, wow, this could have been recorded some time ago. And
thank you.
You're channeling it. You know,
huge compliment. We don't go into that, you know, with that goal, but if it sounds like that, that's amazing, because that's the music that was made during those times was made during times that we'll never experience again. So we have so much talent right now, and I love a lot of music that's out there right now, but there's something really special about the vintage records, and to hear anyone say that about our music is always a great thing.
Well, you can't fake that kind of thing, and the group that you've associated with, Rich and John Patitucci, and then Bill, I mean, you can tell that's in their heart, that's in their soul. It's already bonded within them, and plus they played with so many people over the years. They have such an informed knowledge of that type of music. So you can't really, and you seem to be going along with it. You slip right into it, just like you're one of the gang. So.
Oh, I mean, I usually hang out with cats that are 40 plus. Like, I'm not accustomed to hanging out with people in their 20s. That's not something that I do on a daily basis. And Bill definitely made sure that we got not only seasoned, but like shining, like musicians who've had like incredible careers. And well, that's not how we think of it. We think of it, can he play? And Rich Perry, you know, he definitely saw that he was going to create this beautiful contrast between my relatively more aggressive percussive style and his like sonorous, very tone poet, melodic type of playing. And yeah, he comes from that tradition. You can just hear it. Like, they don't sound like they just came straight out of jazz school, you know, which is a funny joke I like to make from.
Well, Connie, full disclosure, I'm kind of an illiterate songwriter. I love to, I'm self-taught on everything, and my learning of musical theory goes back, you know, several years before you were even around. So I've forgotten most of what I've learned, but I was just curious where you got all your knowledge. Did you take music lessons early on? How did you come to be so proficient in your instrument?
Practice. Oh my God. Well, I'll start from the beginning. I was trained classically by my mother. She was a classical piano instructor. I think she passed me off to someone else when I was getting belligerent, but
Really?
I was a belligerent, rebellious child, yes.
Is she still around, by the way, so she can hear you say that?
I jest with her all the time. She loves it. But yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate to be in a household that encouraged learning classical piano. So I had like a really good technical background. But as far as harmony, like specifically to what you explained, that was something that I learned, I wouldn't say completely self-taught, but I mean, like, I went to an arts high school and I majored in jazz piano there. And there I got like recommended recordings and certain things that I needed to check out in order to learn the language of this music. And me learning harmony kind of came after I transcribed like my favorite solos, my favorite accompaniment. Like, I would literally write down on paper like what I was hearing, and I would figure out from like my favorite guys like what they were doing in their lines to make their chords sound a certain way. And eventually I figured out like piece by piece. I was like, okay, so the reason this sounds cool is because there's a sharp 9. It's like, okay, why does this resolve so nicely? It's like, okay, because there's a tonal center that's being implied by a pentatonic scale.
Yeah.
And I kind of like it started off with like, okay, here are some basic things. Like I took a few lessons, but I would have to say that the majority of what I know and what I think of harmonically is stuff that I came to by like diligent practice in solitude for hours and coming up with my own theories on how to do it. I didn't take like any harmony classes per se. I think being a pianist is it's a privilege because there's a reason why so many music conservatories will insist that other instrumentalists take keyboard class to learn harmony. And that's because the way visually a keyboard is laid out, it's very easy to understand harmony because you can deal not only with just lines and single note melodies, but also building chords. And you have like 88 keys to work with. So you have like lower octaves all the way to the higher octaves. So I think being a pianist also was kind of like a cheat sheet for that, you know?
Yeah, I think I follow you on that.
There's a great book, though. I will recommend one book. I learned, I think, quite a few things from that. The Jazz Piano Book by Mark Levine. Okay. And that is the coolest, most simple, awesome book ever. It literally starts from the beginning of like the most basic fundamentals to the most advanced stuff. So I guess that kind of contradicts what I said about everything being self-taught, but let's just say I didn't finish the book.
There's your paradox again. So, you know, that's what jazz is all the time anyway.
Let's just say I didn't finish the book, and
oh, no.
Most of the advanced stuff I came to my own way.
Yeah, but it affected you in some way. You got a good positive experience out of reading some of it. So how far back does that go? When did you start learning piano? What age?
I was 5 when I started learning the actual instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was 14 when I decided to become a jazz piano player.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it took about 9 years for you to sort of develop into your own. What made you decide to stick with it? You know, just because you take lessons doesn't mean you're into it. You know, you're just doing it maybe to learn. And you're who knows why some people. Were you starting to have fun along the way as you were playing? And you know, they can't just force you to play your instrument and learn it. You know, somewhere along the line, it's got to be something that you get enjoyment from, or some kind of satisfaction and accomplishment.
Yeah, I think at the age of 14, that is usually when most people experience like their first existential crisis.
I agree. I do agree with that. 14.
Yeah, that angst appears and you suddenly want to find your life purpose. And jazz filled the void, I guess, in fulfilling a few check marks. The first being the idea of being able to create something that's completely your own in the moment was something that really attracted me. And the second component of that is that it was complex and that it wasn't simple or easy. I've always loved complex music, but also music that had soul and depth. And that was something, those were elements of the music that I recognized instantly. And I've always been a kind of a intellectual masochist as well. Like I like to take on the challenge of doing something that I can't do. And at the time, jazz was something that was so difficult for me to take on. It wasn't easy. What was easy for me was playing the piano. When it comes to putting my hands on the instrument, it's really not something that I think about. But when it came to abstracting and really getting into the grit and dirt of this music, it was just something that was like a calling to me. I can't explain it. I don't think I'm explaining it completely all that well right now, but it was...
I like that you're trying, though. That's what I appreciate, though. You know, because
it fulfilled pretty much every part of my soul at that time. Like I needed the challenge. Like I enjoyed getting to the goal, but I also enjoyed the process of suffering through my issues in the music as well. And the depth of rhythm in this music also really hypnotized me, because that's not something you can get from other genres. I mean, specifically in the West. The depth of a particular artist's feel, or like how they live in their rhythmic universe, is so deep in jazz. And that was something that you can just go down a rabbit hole for forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized that early on, and I really wanted to, you know, someday be able to create my own interpretation of that, because that's something that's truly individual. It's very truly like you. It's a very like, maybe that's a very West American individualist thing to say, but like, I think it really just spoke to like the person that I knew that I already was. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't find that in classical music or pop, or I was listening to a bunch of other crap at the time, and I was like, no.
Well, you at least informed yourself of that. Not everybody does that. Who becomes a nerd, as you were calling it, for that type of all things jazz and everything. That you immerse yourself in the culture and all that music. And if you what do you call stray away from that, you're gonna yeah. But you decided this is what you like. This is your path. You could always branch out into other things. So others have done that. You know, you get a little more pop influence and bring that into there. But let me go back to your, you know, like at 14. How about just the joy of learning to improvise? Is that a good feeling, knowing that you could do that? There's a certain confidence in doing improvisation, right?
I think there's confidence in being a good musician in general, and especially in jazz. Like, one of the biggest hurdles that a young musician has to get over when they transition from an aspiring musician to a professional musician is to have that confidence to know what to do, know where you are, know what you're going to play, and how to do it with swagger, which I think is a huge part of playing jazz. Like, you have to have swagger, like you have to be tough. And that also translates to the social hang. Like, the hang is a huge part of jazz, as jazz is a social art form.
And how is that for you? Do you like the hang?
Do I like it?
Yeah, I mean, is it, you know, I would be awkward in the hang. You know, I was like, am I good enough to hang with these?
I mean, guys? I've always been like an alpha type of person.
Oh, good. So then it's okay for you. It's not.
I guess. Not, at the same time, I'm also an introvert, because I spend a lot of times in solitude, hours trying to figure out stuff for myself. So it's another paradox. You know, I'm a social alpha, but I also love being able to process the way everything works artistically, musically. You know.
Yeah. It's being able to embrace that paradox. I think that's the secret. Just learn to juggle both, you know?
Well, I mean, I think there's an element to every artist that needs to be somewhat introspective, even if they are considered extrovert personality types. Yeah. But confidence is extremely important. I think for any performer in general, but especially in jazz, it's so exposed because you are literally creating a statement at the time. You can't rely on any sort of preconceived something that you're going to do. Like, you not only have to be concerned with how you're going to do it, but you're going to be concerned with what you're doing, what you're going to create at the moment. So I would say that, I mean, this question started with fun. Of course it's fun. There's I don't know, fun is a interesting word, because fun could be instant gratification, or it could also be like really deep gratification of being able to accomplish something that you couldn't do before. And I don't know, I get a lot of joy from being able to do things in this music that work out, I guess, because a lot of stuff in jazz doesn't work out because you're trying shit and it's like you make mistakes, but like when it works out, it's like, I remember I told my teachers when I was in high school, like I want to go out and play with people because I want to experience that feeling that I get when I listen to A Love Supreme. There's something very sublime and like inexplicable about like the feeling that you get from listening to like magic happening on a record. Like there's a reason why certain albums stand the test of time and certain albums just end up in the dustbin and no one cares about it except maybe people like us who like want to like go through stuff and find the discography of like our favorite artists. But those albums had like magical moments that were captured in time. And like I used to get so excited, like dopamine hits, like every single time I got to those like certain climaxes in and like moments when guys would like lock up and like it's like wow. So I would tell my teachers like I want to experience those moments live, like playing. And it's so funny. It's like kids get really caught up in those records and they think every single time it's supposed to be perfect. There are so many of those same people playing the same songs, like bootlegs where they just sound like absolute. Can I cuss?
Yeah, you can do that.
Shit, like complete.
Well, don't say that.
Oh,
just kidding.
Complete shit. So there's a certain like, what's the word? Romanticism about those records that I got really caught up in, and I still get caught up in. But I think it's less like to me now, you know, it's like, okay, I know what they're doing.
Actually, I'm really glad that you went off on that whole explanation. That was pretty much an answer to a question I was going to ask you anyway. So I like that. And plus, I'll even add to that. Have you ever been like, soloing like on or improvising in some way? Have you ever stunned yourself going like, wow, that sounded great. I did something that just even surprised me. Have you ever done something like that before?
That's definitely happened.
Yeah. I think that's magic right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the moments, there have been times where I'm like, wow, I really crafted that phrase impeccably. And sometimes it's something that you don't intend to do. And sometimes it's even a mistake. But it ended up being like, let's say, in a part of the phrase that's not normally what you do. And that's what makes it sound fresh, you know? And that's the kind of possibility that you get in jazz, like in improvised music that you don't get anywhere else. And those are really special moments. And I will always treasure every moment that I have live on stage that possesses that kind of magical energy, you know?
Yeah. Now you played on stage. Do you play in a trio setting or what?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the main format that I perform in.
That's nice. That's pure and fresh. I love the trio, you know. Quartets are fine too, but I mean, something about a trio is it's a perfect triangle, perfect triad, or whatever you want to say about it. But it's trifecta, try anything, whatever it is. Yeah, it's beautiful to me anyway.
I love trio formats just because it gives me the opportunity to really play, like because I'm the one playing the melody, like I'm not accompanying anyone aside from the bassist, and it gives me a lot of opportunity and space to play a lot of piano and fill in a lot of the meat, I guess.
Yeah.
So
well, that's wonderful. When you're when you're recording the album with these cats, Bill and Rich and John and even Katis that you were talking about there, I'll take that back. Katis wasn't in the room with you all, but you just explained that earlier. Sorry. Like, do you get it all in one take, or if you have to do another take, are you doing it pretty much the same way, or do you find that you're doing the take in this one will come out a little different? You start to play differently.
Well, let me say first of all that it always comes out differently. As far as coming out differently by saying let's build everything from the bottom up.
There has to be a structure, right? But
there is a structure, and especially on this album, there was a lot of structure because we had arrangements and we had specific compositions. There are plenty of jazz records that don't do that. Like everything is very, very open. But yeah, I mean, we'll do multiple takes and we'll make sure that we pick the take that has the best cohesive playing, the best solos, the cleanest execution. Sometimes guys are out of tune or whatever. And I mean, it's interesting to me because Art Blakey used to like record the same song over and over again, and his horn players would literally play the same licks in the same exact spot.
Yeah.
And it's
But art would
hilarious.
play just slightly different around them, right? Or under them. Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is that we try to avoid that,
Okay.
trying to play the same part in what's supposed to be like improvised solo.
Yeah.
If I listen back to some of those takes, they would all be different, but the melody would be played mostly the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So even the outtakes are pretty incredible, I'm sure. But I was just curious if there was, because if Bill's calling the shots, but he gives you the freedom to go ahead and play as colorfully and as unique as you want to, right?
That's the point. He is a multifaceted talent, because not only does he have like that musical talent, but also the visionary talent, where he knows if certain things are in certain contexts, certain people are really going to shine. And he wrote the chord changes, for example, on Wind Rose Goddess, especially at the ending, and on Prima Materia, the beginning track, to really allow me to flourish and go to town, let's say, on the piano. And really, it's about encouraging creative freedom rather than creating a structure for me to appear in a boxed-in context. It's like creating context and vehicles so that I can really shine and glow, I guess, like really be able to tell my story within like his very lush chord changes. Like he loves using, like I said, those impressionistic types of harmonies where you can get really colorful, and those are the harmonies that kind of appear in like the 60s, like after the very like traditional functional harmony of bebop, like chords that appeared on like Maiden Voyage.
Sure.
Herbie, like very ethereal sus seventh chords, and the
I
entire.
thought when you said bebop, I thought we were going back to like Thelonious Monk or like Bud Powell and things like that.
That's what I'm talking about. Like what I'm saying is that the harmony appeared like post bebop. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
So the harmony is like a lot of beautiful like sus seventh chords, sus 4, beautiful minor 11, and Prima Materia, the first song, he composed it basically cycling through all 12 keys in like these really lush minor chords, and that's like my shit. So it's really he really knows how to write for my solos, which is great.
Well, that's good. And you all come from different backgrounds and everything like that, but you somehow came together. And remember, I'm illiterate on this stuff. I don't, when you say sus 4th or sus 4.5, whatever it is, those kind of things. Flat 7th. When you say pentatonic, is that the scale you most are? Is there a scale that you gravitate, or is just whatever note you start on, that's what you go with?
The harmony stuff is actually really not that important. In the grand scheme of things. I think of it as like tools in like an artist palette, where there's a great quote by Charlie Parker where he said, you learn the rules and then you break all of them when you go out and play. And that's what you're supposed to do. I don't think about this shit when I'm performing.
Expression's where it's at, and that's what you're saying. don't
expression, but it's also like something that I see a lot of like jazz students in high school or even college go through, is that they'll get so fixated on like making sure they're putting the right note at the right time in the right chord, and like it'll interrupt their musical idea. And it's okay to play the wrong thing as long as you sell it. Well, I don't know, maybe not. Yes, sell it, and really sell it within a musical idea that's strong enough. And that comes back to melody.
There you go.
Melody is the most compelling element in music. We can throw out all the other crap out the window, okay, these, do you know your modes? Do you know Dorian, Locrian, blah, blah, blah. No.
Well, I worked with somebody who's very knowledgeable in that, and I said, I don't know, this is over my head. Can we just play something that really sounds awesome?
Yeah.
Something that's going to cook, and it's going to, and like you said, the melody, what is it that you end up singing or humming to yourself when you finally get it in your head? It's that melody, that through line all the time, that sort of that that earworm, as they call it.
Yeah,
that's what the melody is. It's what sticks in you. So
yeah, if you can't sing it, then it's trash.
Yeah,
that's the general rule.
That's why pop music works. Some of those one-hit wonders, they're there for a reason on pop radio. Yeah. So
I mean, I may sound like a super like jazz exclusive snob, but I would say that I am a music lover. I love great music. And that experience that you get from being touched by a great song with a tasteful melody that touches you, that transcends genre. Sure, each genre has like specific values and certain rules and customs that people abide to in order to keep that genre distinct from other genres. But at the end of the day, we're trying to reach the apex of the pyramid, which is experiencing something that you can't put into words through music. So, I primarily listen to jazz and classical music, at least at this time, but
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was good. See, that was in my mind. I was sort of considering things I would ask you about that. I was going to say, you must, on your off time, you must be listening just for fun to other online streaming, however you consume your music now. Is there anything out there that's contemporary that you're listening to that sort of grabs you as, that it's not in the jazz field?
I only say no because I'm working on very specific projects right now where I have to listen to certain things. So
it'll keep you focused then, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm very focused. So I wish I had a better answer.
Good for you. No, I've talked to some classical musicians that do that. They will listen to, like maybe classic rock music from the 70s and 80s. And yet when it's time to buckle down, I gotta swim in this pool right now. And it's not.
Does Joni Mitchell count?
As jazz, no. Even though she's done it. Yeah, she's done some
I meant,
things
does Joni Mitchell count as like another artist?
Sure.
I don't know. She's not contemporary. Like her heyday was not now.
No, anything goes. That's what I was looking for. Something that might.
Yeah, there's that. I mentioned Stephen Sondheim. I'm a huge fan of his music. I'm trying to think of other things. I think if I went through my playlist, I was gonna say Pat Metheny because he does pop too, but
yeah,
he's mainly a jazz.
Yeah, more like he would hang with like Chick Corea. So
there's some J-pop songs I really like. By a band named Capsule. J-pop is really interesting because their songs compositionally have like really rich harmony and go to places that American fast food pop doesn't go to. And I say specifically fast food pop because I know that there's other pop artists that are like really, really great.
A lot of the pop culture for J-pop, whether it's music or literature, like the K-pop and J-pop, both they have not what you expect, from, like as you said, the American fast food music scene and all that stuff. It's a little bit different. Like BTS, for instance, that kind of thing. But I mean, you're seeing that, but there's so much more to that. I've heard the K-pop and J-pop things before. So I understand what you're saying.
There's a specific producer I'm trying to name who writes these really amazing J-pop songs, like contemporary. So that's like definitely.
Oh, they're very good for like scoring movies and such. There's some brilliant composers in that arena too.
Yasutaka Nakata. He's like the Bill Wyszynski of that man. Yeah, he writes.
There's a compliment.
He writes really similar harmony to Bill, actually.
Okay, really I'm going to try to pull this tugboat back into the shore.
Yeah,
I do. These are just little curious things. Most of my questions are sort of like Socratic in nature. Yeah, it's like we could all sort of guess what the answer is, but I love hearing it come from you because you never know what's going to come out, and you've had some pretty brilliant things to say for a
Thank you.
26-year-old, and I'm not doing that as to be pandering or anything like that.
No,
I think it's
appreciate
really
it.
incredible the head on you. You know what I'm saying?
I've been told that I have an old soul. Um, and one of the things that I worked on a lot was the authenticity of my musical accents, I guess, as a pianist, because it's very common as an instrumentalist to be able to play the notes, but not to be able to play the notes with any sort of authenticity that the guys in the 50s through the 70s had with their feel, which goes back to that rhythmic depth that I was talking about. And to me, that translates from music to life.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of always been a precocious kid, weird person since I was very young.
Do you have any best friends or close friends who just sort of put up with what you like? They don't agree with your or they're not into your style of music, but they still, yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Of
Like that,
course.
they don't. It's not
Yeah.
requirement that you have to listen to this kind of stuff to be with me. You know, that kind of thing. I think
Well,
I know it's a dumb question, but it's kind of
no,
funny that.
it's actually a great question because so many musicians and artists get so caught up in their careers and get so caught up in their artistry that they forget that they're also human beings.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can get along with someone and connect with someone on a very deep level and still spend time and have a great time and have loyalty, brotherhood, sisterhood with a person without having them also be so heavily involved in what you do artistically.
Yeah.
And that's something I think a lot of artists. I listened to quite a few podcasts, and I remember there was a French horn player who became like a political correspondent. I forget his name, and he actually said this to his interviewer, where he said, like, I realized that I don't need to put all my self-worth into just my art, and that allows me to not be a complete asshole to everyone who doesn't like jazz or like doesn't like classical music or whatever. It's like, I think that also comes with maturity. I noticed that a lot of young people in their 20s, they're like, I'm all about my art, and if you're not into it, I'm not going to be interested in you, unless maybe you're like the opposite sex and I just want to get laid or something. But that's also very common. But
well, what this gentleman was probably what I gather from that is that not to take yourself completely seriously, and you come to the realization that it's either going to be they're going to listen to you strictly for your music, or they'll like you in other ways too. Now you've sort of branched off and you've endeared yourself on another level with them, politically or whatever it is, and now they can say, well, he's an asshole, but at least I like his music. That kind of thing.
And there are a lot of guys out there like that, where they're reprehensible human beings, but they make brilliant art. And then there are brilliant, amazing human beings that you want in your life.
Yeah.
Who may not contribute something artistically that is like, wow, But I guess to answer your question, I think it's important to have, because at the end of the day, people are the most important thing. People are what keep, humans are social animals. So you have to put people first. You have to put loyalty, friendship, empathy, compassion first. And I think if you have those qualities as a person, you can really be like a quality artist. I think if you're a fucking psychopath, that's not going to go well. Music and art is all about emotion and communicating something to your audience.
People wouldn't be the first to be that way, but I loved it. That being said, let's talk about your music. Before we part ways, I got to talk about this album in a little bit of detail. Take it from the top. Explain Secrets of Inanna. You said it was kind of like Bill sort of came up with the concept, right?
Yeah, but he also came up with the title.
Well, isn't that nice though? That I don't know how far back this mythology goes. Like when you were talking about, other Greek female figures in mythology or whatever. But this is like Mesopotamian, Sumerian culture. Like you said, she was an underground type of figure.
I wouldn't say underground. She's lesser known.
Lesser known, that's a better way to put it. Yeah,
she's lesser known because she is, like I said, she's the proto goddess. So she preceded Aphrodite and Venus in being like the first known goddess in written word, based on ancient cuneiform tablets, which were excavated, by the way, from that area in Mesopotamia. And her story is told through those fragmented tablets that had to be put together by archaeologists and then studied and translated by Sumerian scholars.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a huge effort that involved a lot of people, and eventually a cohesive story came out about her that really detailed her whole person. Like, she's a very complex goddess. What makes her so interesting is that she's not only the goddess of love and beauty, a beacon of femininity, and sex as well. She's also a very ambitious, aggressive, and politically motivated person, and she has an insatiable lust for power. And I love that about her because she embodies both femininity as well as traits that are commonly associated with masculinity. She's just very passionate, and she has this inexorable drive to just conquer. And I love that about her.
Yeah.
You know, not many people would recognize that they are inspired by her story to create strong female characters in like sci-fi or fantasy, but she is kind of like the first, like the OG of that type of.
She's the OG muse of all time.
Exactly,
You know?
She's the OG muse. I actually got a funny comment the other day from a fan that said, like, "You are both the muse and the masterpiece," and I'm like, "Geez, that's a very nice comment." But she is like the muse. Like, people like covet her, and she's like the inspiration, the muse, but she's also like the bad bitch. She's also the queen. And I love that she embodies both things. Like, she has agency, but she's also like you said, a muse.
Yeah.
And she is just when I found out about her and her like whole personality and how complex and kind of how quick she was to be enraged, I love that about her, because she's not perfect. You know, she's not like this perfect goddess of love. Like, she has a dark side to her, which plays a huge part in her arc when she descends to the underworld in the Descent of Inanna, which is like the final part of her story.
Oh yeah.
And it's epic. I mean,
spoiler alert, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a spoiler. I've talked about it too much already, but
well, when I first brought up the question, I think what I was going for, and by the way, I love all the things that you just said there, but it was like, how inspiring is that you know, every generation that's been born right up to the present day identifies themselves in some way. You know, there are females that will identify with that particular character, Inanna, you know.
Yeah.
It's just it shows you the strong the influence that it's had over the years. You know, it's a very universal type of
absolutely
what women to aspire to, you know.
Yeah. What I will definitely say though is that it transcends modern politics. Mythology and the stories and the lessons that these stories impart transcend gender, transcend modern politics. And I mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation that she goes through a version of the hero's archetype. And that is a spiritual inward journey that every person, man or woman, can identify with. You know, because when she overcomes her obstacles in order to become queen of heaven and earth and then face her dark side, she has to die and then resurrect. That's something that I think a lot of people go through in their own way when they try to overcome any struggle, where at first they thought that was impossible, but then they accomplish the impossible and they come out the other end after having experienced great pain and great suffering, where it seemed like there was no light at the end of the tunnel, but there was.
Yeah.
And that is a really cool universal story that has endured for thousands of years across a myriad of cultures from the east to the west. And Inanna experiences her own version of that, which is why I like to say it transcends modern politics. So when I said strong female, whatever, I wasn't trying to say anything specific to modern politics. And I want to make a stance that that's definitely not how I interpret Inanna. Inanna is, I think, I mean,
trying to explain it is just as complex as she herself, you know.
She celebrates femininity without trying to impose a matriarchy, let's say.
Okay, there you go. That's a good way to round that out.
Yeah,
I dig that. That's wonderful. But the Secrets of Inanna is the name of the album, and lots of crazy names in the tracks. Probably because those are all the players and or the characters, or like Erich Kigel. Who knew what that was? I had no idea what that name.
Yeah.
Ninshabur, if I think.
Yeah.
I think that was just an excuse for Bill to show off his drum playing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean,
a quick solo. Yeah.
It was very appropriate. Well, because Ninshuber was the right hand, like the bodyguard, right, for Inanna. And she lamented Inanna when she died at the underworld, and she removed her regalia and her clothing in order to show her mourning and her lament. So that's where that came from. Erich Kigel is the second, I think, most important character. I would say that she's like one of the antagonists in the story, in that she represents sort of the anti-Inanna. Like, she reflects all of the dark parts of Inanna that she's trying to confront when she descends into the underworld. She's like a doppelganger. If you look at the packaging of my LP, you see Inanna in the front and you see Erich Kigel in the back. And my photographer did a brilliant job lighting and editing these photos, because the front shows these warm, very benevolent, welcoming tones, and then the back is very cool and it's blue and it's very like cold and dark. And those are supposed to signify the contrast and the opposites, the yin and yang of Inanna and Erich Kigel.
Beautiful album cover, by the way. Yeah. All your covers are great. I very hip looking. In other words,
Thank you.
not boring. I'm not. I don't know how. very stunning cover that you have for
Thank you.
Secrets of Inanna. Yeah, and
Well,
I like the way you explain how that works now. So it's both. It's the yin and yang, little backlighting of the other world there. So.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to when you're trying to embody a goddess, right? Like you can't half-ass that. Yeah, especially the goddess of love, sex, and war. You know, you have to sort of put some effort into that. You know, yeah. I mean, creating that album cover was really cool because you know those circles that are intersecting. That's actually a song title, Vesica Pisces.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's a symbol that you often see in Venn diagrams, but it's actually a sacred geometry type of symbol that not celebrates, but it is a sacred symbol denoting femininity, fertility. The almond shape is supposed to be very feminine, you know, and that's a symbol that's very commonly associated with Inanna, and also the circle is represents infinity, right, and perfection, which is a very, very common symbol that appears in many cultures, and it has like a sacred meaning. So it's really, really cool to like kind of insert that in that duo that I play with Rich Perry. In the one, it's funny that I tell you that I wrote all the aggressive music, right? And Vesica Pisces, that duo I do with Rich, is probably the most delicate performance on the album. But I guess that's supposed to be like encapsulation of Inanna's femininity as told by the Vesica Pisces. So yeah, Bill and I put so much thought into like the symbolism and the meaning behind each song and how each serves as like a vignette or a statement about certain angles of Inanna's life and certain symbols that are associated with her.
starting to get stunned here. This is like I'm learning a hell of a lot, and you've set the bar so high now. It's at level level awesome, level 10, level 11. Gallo Pursuit. That's another reference, right? Isn't that the demon?
Yeah, Galu demons.
Yeah.
They're like Ereshkigal's
Yeah.
bodyguards and minions, and they pursue Dumutsi, who is another character in the story.
Of Uruk or whatever, Uruk.
Yes, yeah. He's the husband of Inanna, and Inanna, needs to trade places with someone that she loves in the underworld in order to be free and to ascend back to the heaven after she dies. And Dumutsi is a great candidate because during Inanna's death, he did not mourn her. He instead decided to play around with his harem of young women on her throne. And he did not give a damn that she was literally flayed, hung from the throne room wall of Ereshkigal's throne room. And he tries to escape the Galu demons by transforming into an animal and running away, but eventually he is caught by them, and that's why it's called the Galu Pursuit, because
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the other single that was released?
Prima Materia.
Oh, fantastic one. That's the opener on the thing. It's That's if you hadn't heard Connie Han before, that's a good entree into that first track. You're going to learn just what she's about, and her personality comes out in her piano, and goes on and on, on and on. After a while, you find out that it's almost like the Connie Han band, so to speak, the ensemble, because you have Rich jumping in there a few times, like Morning Star, right? He's featured very prominently on that song.
Very heavily.
Yeah. But John Patitucci, we didn't talk enough about him. I love when the bass can take a solo. Young Moon, I think all of a sudden he just sort of pops in there out of nowhere, or up to the front there, and you can hear him plucking away on the bass, on the upright there. It's wonderful.
Yeah, he takes a very... I love playing in 3/4. I love playing a modern jazz waltz because you can really play with that and play some pretty intricate rhythms, and he does that quite a bit. And his intonation is extremely strong. I would say more clear than a lot of jazz bass players. I mean, that's kind of what he's known for being a virtuoso jazz bassist, like having world-class classical technique as a jazz bassist and being able to play that vocabulary with extreme precision and melodicism.
Yeah, I love the jazz waltz style because it's always touched me over the years, because you could play it in a haunting style like you do in a lot of the songs, or you guys are doing, or a whimsical way. It still grabs me. I just love the way it feels. The time it carries itself just perfectly. You know?
Yeah, and that tune, like Gallo, I would say is also indirectly influenced by Chick Corea's approach to modern jazz waltz. That appears quite a bit on his album Now He Sings, Now He Sobs. And I will definitely say that John is one of the only cats on bass out there right now who could play like fast eighth notes up bass on the Gallo Pursuit. Which
I love to see. Bass is my instrument. You can see that I have an acoustic back here. That's the toughest thing for me to figure out how to do. Play eighth notes on a bass. You got to have some control. You know what I'm saying? You got to be disciplined to do it properly.
Yeah, I mean, and most of the time, it's not your job to play eighth notes most of the time, right?
Yeah.
So, like, why would you? It's kind of like the left hand in a piano player's skill set. Most of the time, it's relegated to support, and sometimes you forget to exercise it and keep it fit. But yeah, I mean, eighth notes on a bass, especially at that tempo, the Gallo Pursuit tempo, which is around like 270, 280 BPM.
Yeah.
Hearing him play that so clear is really great, because that sounds like John Patitucci, you know?
Yeah.
So.
You can sort of sit back and take in all the other solos, the piano, the drum solo, all that. Once the bass is playing, the acoustic, you also have to lean in, because everybody's got to quiet down just a little bit and give him a chance to shine.
Yeah, there's a common joke about how everyone just starts talking during the bass solo.
Yeah. Jazz players taking a break didn't realize the guy was still doing the bass solo, so he's still doing it.
It's very common, which is probably why guys like John, you know, shine. Like, there are great bass players in jazz specifically where people just don't talk about them like they talk about certain virtuosos, because they didn't play with that, like, eighth note, whatever, but they're the reason the band even existed. You know, like Jimmy Garrison is a great example, the John Coltrane Quartet. He didn't play like super flashy solos, but he like played with a beat that really was super deep. And I will say that that is arguably maybe the most important thing. You know, but I
Well,
as I
you liked Coltrane because you talked about McCoy Tyner. He was the one on those the big recordings that Coltrane made, right? McCoy.
yeah.
Yeah, he was playing My Favorite Things. That whole album, I think that was him, right?
Yep.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I
So
love these guys. In fact, he just died a couple years ago. So I remember when he was, and we just lost Ramsey Lewis. There's all kinds of great jazz that
and check.
all come. I mentioned Bill Evans at the beginning. You know, there's a similarity in what you do. I think there's a similarity in the runs that Kenny Kirkland did.
He's one of my biggest influences.
Oh, he's another guy we lost. But when I heard him join Sting's band, it's almost been 40 years ago now. But to hear him in a setting like that, where he was playing almost like pop hybrid jazz,
Oh yeah.
I was blown away. I couldn't take my ears off it. Kenny was amazing. I loved it. Very clean and very and he was another one that believed in like expanding horizons. Don't be so pure with your jazz sensibility.
Oh, he was really funky.
Yeah.
And that's a feel thing that he had uniquely that I don't think many jazz pianists had like him, where he could fit right into Sting. You know, he had that groove, and that's actually something that really influences my playing and my music as well, where you're able to transcend that like traditional swing feel and be able to play that way over a bossa or play that way over a Latin. Like you can swing over a straight eighth thing, and that's a very deep rhythmic concept that I think Kenny understood quite innately. You know, I think he grew up in that. I always wonder what it's like to grow up in a culture that communicates basically through rhythm. I think it's Caribbean. I'm not completely sure exactly which heritage, but that's the thing that I kind of envy a little bit, because I grew up in a classical background, so I had to learn this stuff in a studious way, where like these guys, they grew up in it, and it's like amazing to hear, because you can hear it because they're living in it, and they bring that to pop music. They bring that to like any setting and into a modern setting, and I just that whole like his universe is crazy. As you can tell, he's one of his recordings was probably the reason why I became like a jazz pianist.
Kenny, you talking about?
Yeah. Kenny Kirkland specifically.
Yeah. That's how I was introduced through Sting. See, I was one of these guys that was a Sting. He inspired me lyrically and the way he would put together a song. He would compose something. And I always knew that he had a jazz background, but I always enjoyed jazz and then introducing jazz into another genre and seeing what happens. You know, Steely Dan was like that. They would get all the best players that came from the jazz world to do stuff that almost sounded like rock music and jazz at the same time. You know, crack the whip all the time, but you know, at the same time they say, we want you to play like you. Don't play the same notes every time. We're going to do a few takes. Don't play it the same way each time. We want to do something fresh. And that's why I was sort of asking that question earlier about the takes. You know, does every take sound the same, or does it have a different feel? And then you go with, oh wow, I wish I was playing better on that take when you were playing all the great licks on that one. So
yeah. I mean, guys like Sting and even like Joni Mitchell, like these pop artists that are like kind of art pop, where they flirt with jazz and they collaborate with certain jazz musicians. They have that mindset where they want it to be different, rather than it's really heavily produced and the song is the same way every time and we want it to be a hit.
Okay, thank you for you know, going down the rabbit hole a few times with me. I appreciate that. I just always like to explore a little bit about the, you know, the background. You've tapped into something pretty good. Talk about a theme album. This puts those rock theme albums to shame. This kind of thing right here. This is like a whole story told through you know, the likes of Bill Wysocki, and did I say that correctly?
Wysocki. Like imagine if there was
another way, like wise ass except key. I got it. Okay.
That's a great way to remember it, and I think a lot of people used to give him shit about that.
Well, that's how I do it. That's my mnemonic device. I should have done it earlier so I don't disrespect him, because I think he's done something very, very special, and you're at the forefront of it, and it's your album, your whole thing. So I wish you all success with this. It's you certainly are a talented pianist, that's for sure. Can I say a little bit about the Rhodes piano too, the electric piano? There's something about that flavor that grabs me too from a long time ago. That's my I can't get enough of that for some reason. So I liked how you played it in that one. So
Thank you. I mean, it's just such a cool sound. It's ethereal, it's hip, it can get crunchy if you've got that drive on. It's a totally different animal from a Steinway piano, and it's very fun to explore.
yeah.
And I will say that if Bill didn't encourage it, I wouldn't play it nearly as much, but I always never regret that we include it. Because we've doubled piano and Rhodes before on a track. I think it was on the first track of Crime Zone or something. And the texture of like the combination between the piano and the Rhodes is such a fresh sound that we also do on Prima Materia and Anki's Gift, which is the closer. So the Rhodes is definitely something that I also include in my writer for my live shows, because we like to play the songs that we play on Rhodes on the records also live, you know. Like, I don't think the waltz translates to piano as well. It kind of starts to sound a little not as cool, to be honest. It starts to sound the chords communicate something different. Yeah.
Good action in that Rose, but as you were saying before, that Steinway that you play, very intense action. There's some times you hit the high notes, I go, great, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
when you hear it coming up to the top keys there, that's really good. What is the exact instrument that you're playing? A Steinway what?
A Steinway Model D. It's 9 foot. I don't know exactly what year, but it's definitely a 1970s instrument that was rebuilt. It was rebuilt and I think restored very recently. But
is that the studio one or your own personal?
I thought you were talking about the studio piano.
Yeah, that's what you played on. Yeah, I remember you talking about the 9 foot.
Yeah, it's 1970s. And the great thing about older wood is that it has a warmer tone that you can only attain through age. It's like wine or whiskey.
Yeah.
Rather whiskey. Wine's for pussies. But
there's the song. There's the show title right there. Wine's for pussies. Got it.
Yeah.
After all we said, it's got to come down to that stuff. But wonderful. What is the instrument that you play at home?
I play a 1968 Model B.
Oh, okay. So it's another Steinway. You got to keep the same sound. Isn't that? I mean, you were talking about Oscar Peterson. Can you imagine? When I remember, he's the only one I could remember that had an odd piano. With
no, he played a Bosendorfer.
Bosendorf. The 290 had like 97 keys on it. I'd never heard of that before until Oscar Peterson was one of my favorites. You know, maybe he's not American, but he was still awesome. I still think of him as one of the greats of his time.
Yeah, I agree. I never really studied Oscar Peterson as hard as I studied the other guys I mentioned, but he was one of the first jazz pianists to really create a career out of like his trio and his show, and he was so effective in doing that, and his beat with his trio was just phenomenal. He's kind of in that lineage of guys like Errol Garner as well.
I was going to mention him too. Yeah,
they're like these like showcase type of pianists who are very virtuosic, and the band isn't so interactive like, you know, in Chick's band or McCoy's band. It's amazing piano ability, and his pocket and he was impeccable, you know. Some guys are more like rough around the edges, they don't play always all the right notes, but Oscar Peterson was like really impeccable. And he played a Bosendorfer.
And you talk about commitment. He dragged that thing everywhere he went. He had a special truck that take it gig to gig or whatever, you know, when he did a concert.
That's serious.
That's serious stuff right there.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. I'd be afraid of breaking the thing or having them break it on me. So anyway.
It's discrimination because every other instrumentalist gets to bring their own gear, right?
Yeah.
Because pianists have to lug around this thing that can kill you. It's looked down upon. I mean, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's not like you load it in the van and let's go, you know.
Right. Yeah. Kind of makes sense now why there are so many keyboardists now. They exclusively play keyboards.
Connie Hahn, it was really a delight talking with you. I didn't know that I'd have so much to talk with you about because I'm kind of a simple-minded guy. I like how music makes me feel, and I'd love to talk to songwriters, composers who are doing it and who love what they do. And I kind of get that feeling. You may not come right out and say I love what I do, but that's what I get from you. You know, this is your world. You've chosen it, and you wear it proudly. So I think that all my best to you for sure.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think we covered so much ground, and thanks to you for inspiring some interesting answers, I guess.
Thank you. You can sort of make this a quick answer if you want. I usually have a standard, any advice you would have for people, because when you get down, sometimes you doubt whether you can keep going, and how life gets in the way. Anything that you could say that's a good pick-me-up line? Not pick-up line, but pick-me-up?
I'll definitely say that if you're ever feeling apathetic or uninspired, just go back to what you originally listened to or saw, or try to re-experience that experience that made you love what you do. Like, I will literally go back and listen to my favorite records from when I was a teenager just to get myself back in the game, because that puts you spiritually in tune with yourself. So this is going to be too long, but the reason why people experience so many fragmented, like, imbalance in their soul is that they're not, like, spiritually harmonious, I guess, if that makes sense. And you have to put yourself in tune with why philosophically you do what you do. And you have to experience not only the instant gratification of dopamine of doing something, but, like, the deeper bliss of why you want to do something. That's not a line, but that's the process of getting back into being inspired to do what you do, because it's not easy. It's hard, Yeah. There are a lot of things about this business that's hard. It's not just the music, but it's business. And it's really... it's challenging, but meditation is good too.
I'm glad you had an answer like that, because that's kind of the point of the question is, because a lot of moving parts. Sometimes the parts that you don't like doing get in the way of what you love doing, and you have to come back to that basic need, that basic good feeling that you have, and go back to your favorite songs, things like that.
And it's also a very simple advice to say it's okay to suffer from time to time, or all the time, because suffering is a part of the human experience. It is part of what makes you alive, and that's a very stoic concept. That's a tenet of stoicism, a philosophy that embraces the hardship of life. And I think that may not be appealing to a lot of people, but I actually find a lot of optimism in that, because it's okay to not be, like, happy all the time about what you're doing.
That's what I'm saying.
Because I think a lot of the great art comes from strife and hardship, and sometimes your greatest work may come from those moments. So don't reject those, embrace it, because that's part of living. And I think that's also imparted by the mythology in Inanna's story, and so much of mythology. Buddhism explains a lot about that too, embracing something. So
wonderful. See, that you came up with you did it. You crushed it. That's an excellent answer. I appreciate that. I appreciate that so much, because
definitely not a one-liner.
Well, this whole thing is a long game. You would have wussed out a long time ago, I think, if you had that attitude. You would say, I'll go find something else to do. I'll go work at Wendy's or something weird like that. Thank you for spending all the time you did, Connie, and I think you're wonderful, and so is your music. I want everybody to go check this out. It's called Secrets of Inanna. It's very unique, and you'll see why in this show, and go check it out. I think it's ConnieHan.com, correct?
That is it.
Yeah, and pronounce her name right when you spell it.
The Han Dynasty. That's a great way to remember.
The Han Dynasty. I like that. Okay, great. God bless you in your endeavors, and I hope I see you down the road. If you come out with another one, I'd love to talk with you again. This has been an inspiring talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure of mine.
Okay. You take care of yourself.
Okay, great.
Okay. Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye, Dean.
There she goes. For more information on Connie's music, go to ConnieHan.com. That is ConnieHan, HAN.com. For more information on Secrets of Inanna and her back catalog. You're going to love it. Pianist, composer Connie Han channels the ancient goddess of love, beauty, and war on her most bold, stunning, and ambitious album to date. Out September 23, 2022. And that's it. I got to go. My name is Dean Olson. Thank you for listening. StrongWriter.com, DeanOlsonRadio.com. Please check it out. Power Me Up Radio, talk 24/7, the station with heart on iHeart. Gotta go. Have a great day. God bless. Take care. And we'll talk to you next time. Goodbye now.
You've been listening to StrongWriter on the radio, as heard on the Dean Olson radio program and heard all across America on Power Me Up Radio, powered by Raven International.